So hi everyone, my name is Dr. Helen Flanagan for the Early Intensive Behavioral Intervention or EIBI program in Halifax. And I'm really thankful that you've chosen to spend your Monday night coming out tonight to hear a talk about positive behavior support or PBS and how PBS can help to reduce challenging behaviors in kids who have autism spectrum disorders. So when I'm talking tonight about challenging behaviors, I'm talking about any behavior that you as a parent or a caregiver or a teacher finds challenging and would like to reduce. And this slide just shows a range of different types of challenging behaviors that we can see in our kids. And many of these behaviors are more common in kids with ASD than in other kids. So if you're supporting a little one who has ASD and challenging behaviors, you're certainly not alone. What I thought I'd do tonight is start by reading through a few cases. We'll have a 10-year-old boy called Jake and a 5-year-old girl called Sarah, and we'll read those cases and then follow the cases through the whole talk. So when we're talking about the different steps of the PBS process, we can refer back to those cases. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to find something in one or both of the cases that makes sense for you with the kids that you're working with. So after I introduce the cases, I'll talk a little bit about what I like to think of as the spirit of positive behavior support, or some of the assumptions about challenging behavior that work really well when you're starting out on a PBS plan. And after that, most of the talk will really be the specific steps that you can follow to develop a PBS plan for kids. And then at the end, we should have more than enough time for questions, so certainly write some questions down and we'll look at those. And I've been told that I can put a copy of the slides up on the IWK website after the talk, so they may not be available right away, but hopefully quite soon you'll be able to access a copy of the slides on the website. So we'll dive right into the cases, and I'll just read along with you. So our first case is a 10-year-old Jake who loves Minecraft. He learns new things quickly and is very kind to his 8-year-old brother. Jake's parents, Sam and Laura, are struggling with Jake's behavior. Whenever they ask him to do anything, he refuses. He often yells, talks back, and has recently even started to swear. This happens all day long, especially during the morning routine, at homework time, and at bedtime, which on a weekday is really all day long. Sam wants to stop asking Jake to do things so that there'll be less conflict in the home. That's Jake's dad. Jake's mom, Laura, thinks that expectations for Jake should be the same as for his brother. She wants to increase use of timeout, especially when Jake swears. So I'm hoping that case, you can think of some kids that you might know when you read that case. And the other case is about 5-year-old Sarah. Both of these cases are about challenging behaviors at home, but the same principles and ideas would apply at school as well. So 5-year-old Sarah loves swimming, dancing, and cuddling with her mom, Grace. She talks in 1 to 3 word sentences and is just learning to start how to play with toys on her own. Grace is struggling with Sarah's behavior. For months, Sarah's been dumping out toys and ripping books. More recently, she started breaking toys and knocking things over, including the television. Grace is trying to stay calm. She explains to Sarah that these behaviors are not okay and tries to redirect her to more appropriate activities. Behaviors like these can be really challenging and frustrating and stressful for parents and teachers. We often worry about how to manage the behavior. It can be exhausting and confusing and embarrassing, especially when the behaviors happen. When these behaviors happen, we often try lots of different things. We try timeout, reward charts, taking away favorite toys, long discussions. Sometimes our kids' behavior improves and sometimes it doesn't, and we're often left wondering whether we were addressing the behaviors the right way. So PBS is a set of research-based strategies developed out of a scientific field called applied behavior analysis, where the aim is to try to teach new skills and reduce challenging behavior. PBS emphasizes preventing challenging behavior, teaching new skills, and being able to pick strategies that fit really well for individual kids and families and teams. So what it isn't is a standard strategy that you can always use in the same way across different kids. Instead, it's a framework with standard steps that you can follow that will help you to understand the behavior and pick from a range of possible strategies to choose ones that are a good fit for that child in that context. So you might have 2 8-year-old boys who are spitting 10 times a day, and very different plans for those 2 boys, depending on things like the reason for the behavior and their family and their school. So we'll talk a little bit now about the spirit of PBS, or some things that I find it helpful to think about before I go into developing a positive behavior support plan. So I'll start by reading these things out, and then we'll talk about each one after the next. So the first is that all behavior has a purpose. The next is that if we see challenging behaviors, it means that there's some skills that need development. And the third is that if we can figure out a way to meet kids where they are, we can help them to move forward. So often these challenging behaviors that we see in kids can seem really random. If you think of Jake, he's going around swearing and talking back to his parents, and we've got Sarah who's going through the house knocking over toys and breaking things, and it can be really hard to figure out. So it's helpful to step back and think that people, including kids with ASD, only act in certain ways if it results in some kind of beneficial outcome for them. It might be that it changes the environment for them, it lets them communicate something, or maybe it just changes how they feel inside. And when you follow a PBS framework, you spend a fair bit of time trying to figure out what the purpose of the behavior might be for the child's perspective. And we call that the function of the behavior. The good news is there's 4 common functions of challenging behavior. So lots of challenging behaviors we see meet one of these 4 different functions. Sometimes they meet more than one, but we'll start with thinking about it as meeting one at a time. So if you can picture a little girl who's running away, like not running away from home, but like running from you in the moment, she could be doing that for any of these 4 different functions. She could be running away to end a task or interaction that she doesn't like, or to stop a task or interaction that she doesn't want to start from starting. So to end it or to avoid it. She could be running away to try to get some kind of social interaction or connection. She might be running towards other kids she wants to be with, or she might have learned over time that by running, people come over, give her attention, and get her started with something else more social that she enjoys. She might also be running to get access to toys or activities that she likes. So again, she might be running towards a toy she wants or an activity she wants, or she may have learned that if she runs, she gets hooked into a new toy or a new activity that she likes afterwards. And she might just be running because she really likes the feeling of running, or in that moment her body just wants to run, so that even if no one was there, no one was going to give her any attention, she wasn't going to start a new activity afterwards, the feeling of running is the purpose of the running in that moment for her. So you can picture if we had 4 different kids who are running for 4 different reasons, you'd want to have 4 different plans to help them. So that's our first assumption, that all behavior has a purpose, and you'll see that theme go throughout the talk tonight. The next assumption of PBS is that when we see a challenging behavior, it's a sign that there are some skills to develop in our kids. And this can be a new way of thinking. Often when people see challenging behaviors, they see them as the child making a choice in that moment. So choosing to be uncooperative, or to be lazy, or to be manipulative. And this is especially the case for our kids who are tricky, who can cope well sometimes, but not others. So at those times that they're not coping, it can be really easy to think that they're choosing to do something bad or uncooperative or lazy in that moment. And that's really a common way that we think about challenging behaviors on TV, in books, and PBS encourages us to try to challenge that and think in a new way. If we focus on thinking that kids are choosing to be bad, then we'll really focus on using a lot of consequences. Because we'll think, okay, well, if only we can teach them that their behavior is bad, they will choose something different next time. So it can lead us to really put a lot of emphasis on time out and taking away privileges, hoping that that's going to lead the behaviors to reduce over time. So what PBS can do is help us to switch our lens, to see these challenging behaviors as a sign that our kids have skills that they still need to develop. That they're not wanting to do things that will get them in trouble or that will upset us. And if there were other things they could do instead, they'd do that. So it leads us to think about how to teach new skills, how to modify the environment, and how to provide some consequences. You'll still see some consequences, but making sure that they're a really good fit based on the kids' current skills. So this is a summary of some of the common skills that are delayed in kids who have autism spectrum disorders. So if you're a parent or a caregiver or a teacher of a little one on the autism spectrum who has some challenging behaviors, as I'm going through this table, it might be helpful to think, what are some of the skills that they might have delays in where they could use some extra support? Kids with ASD often have delays with their communication. So they have difficulty expressing themselves and understanding more subtle expectations for their behavior. They have social difficulties, so a harder time than others playing with peers or understanding other people's social perspectives. Often these kids have a hard time being flexible, so coping with an unexpected event or managing frustration. Some of these kids go from 0 to 100 before you can even think. So that's common in kids with ASD, and that can be really a skill for these kids to need support with. They can have sensory differences, a hard time coping in loud environments, or hard time coping, focusing on key information in certain environments. Some kids with ASD have a higher activity level than other kids, so they might have a hard time staying in one place or thinking before acting. Anxiety is more common in kids with ASD than in other kids. So if you've got a little one who's anxious, they might be having a hard time trying new things or reasoning calmly in more challenging situations. And lastly, kids with ASD may have learning differences. Some common ones are difficulties with planning and organization and difficulties holding information in memory. It's really helpful to take some time to think about what some of the skill delays are, because that'll be an important part of the PBS plans that we make. I do think it's also important, though, to recognize that our kids with ASD have really important strengths, too. So to not get lost in some of the delays or challenges that they have when we're thinking about their challenging behavior, but also to see some of their strengths. Some of our kids have really nice visual strengths. They have good skills with logical thinking. They have really good connections with the people they really care about. So if we can think about those strengths, that will also make our PBS plans really strong. So this is my last assumption before we move on to the actual steps of PBS. And this is that if we meet kids where they are, we can gradually move them forward. So if we can figure out a way to understand the purpose of their challenging behaviors and some of the skills that they have difficulties with, we can be confident that there are some effective strategies out there that will help us to change their behavior. So I like the teeter-totter metaphor here. I think what PBS can do is help us to find a middle ground between expecting too little from our kids and not giving them enough opportunities to develop new skills, and expecting too much of our kids so that we end up being too hard on them and on ourselves. So if we think of Jake's parents and where they are in the teeter-totter, Jake's dad, Sam, before the PBS process starts, might be at the bottom of the teeter-totter. He's just saying, can we just stop expecting as much from this little guy so that there isn't conflict in the home? I just want to stop asking him to do things so that we can have a happier time with our family. So he may be in a place where he's expecting too little of Jake, and Jake won't have the opportunity to develop skills. And then we've got Jake's mom, Laura, who might be towards the top of the teeter-totter. She's really wanting Jake to be able to cope with the same expectations right away as Jake's brother, and thinking about emphasizing timeouts and being really quite hard on Jake. So what we often do with PBS is try to find a middle ground where we're expecting enough to teach new skills, but not so much that it's too hard on us or on our kids to be able to cope. Okay. I know there's lots of different sites, but it would be a good time just to pause and see if there are any questions, at least within the room, before I go on to the specific steps of PBS. Okay. So the first step in the PBS process is to pick a specific behavior or routine that you'd like to address. It can be very overwhelming to try to change behavior over the course of an entire day or to try to change multiple behaviors at once. So you really want to feel comfortable with starting small. And what I often recommend to parents and teachers, if you can, instead of picking a specific behavior as your starting point, pick a routine. So what I mean by routine is like bath time or meal times or transitions or circle or bedtime or trips in the car. The PBS process really lends itself well to starting with a specific routine. And then you can gear yourself up for that routine to be using the strategies and to be helping the child. And once you're feeling more comfortable with that routine, you can use similar strategies at other times of the day. So Jake's parents decided to start with the morning routine. And Sarah's mom decided that she'd start with a period of the day between dinner and Sarah's bath, where she noticed that the behaviors were happening more often and where she was often wanting to relax and watch TV or look at emails, and she found the behaviors were happening more often, so she picked that time of the day. It's also helpful at the start to think about how important it is for the behavior to change. This can help us to pick which routine to start with and to even think about whether it makes sense to try to change the behavior at all. I'll recommend a book at the end of the talk, and the authors of that book recommend that you think about the 4 Ds. So think about how dangerous the behavior is, whether it's destructive, whether it's disgusting, and by that they mean like socially inappropriate, and whether it's developmentally inappropriate. So maybe something that would be okay in a 5-year-old, but that in a 10-year-old isn't as appropriate anymore. So to think about those types of variables when you're thinking about where to start. It's also helpful at the start of the process to think about any medical or mental health issues that might be affecting the behaviors that you're seeing. Sometimes behaviors happen because kids are in pain, they've got frequent earaches or headaches, and sometimes, especially with teens and older kids, things like anxiety or depression are affecting kids' behavior. And also ADHD is increasingly commonly diagnosed in kids with ASD and can affect kids' behavior. So if you're starting a plan and you think that there might be health or mental health concerns, it can be helpful to talk to your doctor about that as part of your planning process. Next, you're going to want to be gathering information about the challenging behavior that you're hoping to change. So you can do that in a lot of different ways. You can watch the child. If the child is old enough and verbal enough, you can ask them some questions about their behavior, about what days are harder, what days are easier, those kinds of things. You can talk to other people, your partner, your parents, your child's teacher. And often parents and teachers find it really helpful, if they can manage it at all, to do a behavior log. So this is where you'd actually be writing down information about the behavior, and I'll show you an example of a behavior log. Writing down information about the behavior can let you step back from the emotion that's happening in the moment when the challenging behavior is happening and be more objective. And it can let you see some unexpected patterns in kids' behavior. And there's more and more technology options to use for behavior tracking. So I think for many people it makes sense to just use a piece of paper, write it into the paper. But if you use your phones a lot and you think it would be easier to do it with an app, there are some apps available as well where you can be writing in what happens before the behavior, what happens after the behavior. So one is called Autism Tracker Pro, and I think it's about $10 to $15. So whether you're using an app or using a piece of paper, or whether you're feeling overwhelmed and in the moment you're observing and you're talking and you're thinking about it, but you're not writing things down, you're still going to be wanting to think about the same things. You're going to be wanting to think about what we call setting events, so things that might set the stage for the challenging behavior to be more likely. So are you seeing more difficult behaviors in your kids when they're hungry, when they're tired, when they're sick, when there are changes in their daily routine? Things like that, kind of bigger variables that make it more likely that like a whole day could have more challenging behaviors in it. Then you're also going to be wanting to think about what happens right before the challenging behavior. Who's there? What's being asked of the child? What's happening? Where is the child? What time is it? And here we're thinking about, sometimes people call these triggers, so you're trying to look for triggers for the challenging behavior. And then it's equally important to look not just at what happens before the behavior, but what happens afterwards, if we're trying to understand why the behavior happens from the child's perspective. So does the kid go to a new place? Do they get access to something? Does somebody speak to the child or interact with them in a new way? And then you pull all that information together. And this is an example of the behavior log for Sarah. So I'll read along the rows with you, and what we could do is read through it, and then I'm hoping that you can help me to think about what the function of the behavior might be, or the purpose of the behavior might be from Sarah's perspective. So that puts more pressure on the people who are in the room with me than it does the people who are on other sites. Okay, so what she wrote down, and you can see on the far left, the setting event column, she wrote down, these were both from the same night. So So these two challenging behaviors happen on the same night. Maybe what I'll do actually is skip to the behavior column first. So that night, Sarah rips some books and she knocks over the plant in the main room. So what Mom realized was that Sarah had had a poor night's sleep the night before, so she thought that's a possible setting event for why these behaviors were happening that day. For the first behavior, ripping the book, the antecedent, or what happened right before, Sarah was in her room and Grace was making a snack. So then Sarah rips the books, and what happened was Grace went in and explained the rules to Sarah and then brought Sarah into the kitchen with her. So then the second row, it's the same night, so it's still a poor night's sleep. Grace is writing an email, and Sarah knocks over the plant. So again, Grace explains the rules to Sarah, and then she goes over and sits on the TV with Sarah, and they watch Dora together. So if you're really doing a behavior log, you'd have more than 2 examples of the behavior. You'd want to collect enough behavior that you can start to see some patterns. You are so cute. For those who are offsite, there's an extremely cute little person in the front row in Halifax. You're gorgeous. All right, so does anybody have any ideas? And when I look at this, I can think of at least 2 possible functions. So the potential functions are to try to escape or avoid a task, to get attention or engagement, to get access to toys or activities, or to kind of change your own internal state or get some sensory input. So if people had to take a guess of what the purpose of Sarah's behavior might be, what would they guess?
She wants to social. She wants to attend to her.
I'm hearing a lot of attention and social. Yeah. So that actually was the case when more data was collected. That was the theme that came out. Another possible function based on these 2 things is it could have been to get access to toys or activities. So the second one, she is getting Dora in the second one, but the first one, she's just getting the attention. So that's where it can be helpful to collect enough data to really feel like you're seeing a pattern. But yeah, so you collect data, and then you try to write a summary that pulls together what you've learned. So you're describing the behavior, thinking about what the purpose or function of it is, thinking about when the behaviors are more likely, and what some of the delayed skills affecting the behavior might be. So here we've got the summary for Sarah. In the evening, Sarah knocks over or breaks toys. The purpose is to get social interaction from her mom. And these behaviors are more likely if her mom is busy with something else and if Sarah hasn't slept well. And some of the underlying delayed skills that affect this behavior is that Sarah's communication's just developing, so she may not have many appropriate ways to ask for mom's attention yet. And she's also just learning to play on her own, so without mom's help, it's hard for her to stay engaged with activities. So we'll do a similar process with Jake. Sometimes the setting event column will be blank, and that's absolutely fine. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes there aren't clear setting events. So here we've got the first column. There wasn't a clear setting event, but it's 5 minutes before school, and Jake's mom asks him to feed the dog. He yells at mom. That's not fair. It's a little bit of swearing. And mom threatens to remove screens for the rest of the day. So Jake cooperates at the last minute. So they have a lot of back and forth for 4 minutes, and then Jake's like, fine, and he goes and feeds the dog and leaves the house. So then the next morning, Dad's completing the log, and he's recognizing that Jake's not seeming to feel that well that day, so he thinks that might be a possible setting event. Jake is watching TV in the morning. Dad asks him to clear his dishes from the breakfast table, and Sam says, no way, you're a neat freak. And Sam just decides he doesn't have the energy for that in that moment, so he clears the dishes for Jake. So these are very, very, very common reactions. These types of reactions happen a lot in a lot of families. So here, what do people think the function or the purpose of Jake's behavior might be? Avoidance, yeah. So avoiding or delaying. In the first one, he's still doing it, but he's doing it after 5 minutes. And in the second one, he's not having to do it at all. And you'll often see that kind of avoid and delay grouped together. In any given moment, they don't know whether it will lead to avoid or delay, but it will probably get them one of the two. So here's the summary for Jake. Before school, Jake yells, talks back, and swears when he's asked to do something. The purpose is to avoid or delay having to do those tasks. These behaviors are more likely if Jake is rushed and if the behaviors are unexpected. So that one on the first row would be an example of that. There's only 5 minutes before they're going. Jake doesn't usually have to feed the dog. Those are the ones that would be really likely to be triggers. And Jake's parents recognize that some of Jake's delayed skills are difficulties with planning and organizing his time and difficulty coping with unexpected events in this routine and at other times of the day. Okay, so really a lot of the work of PBS is gathering that type of information, and then once you've got that information, you're ready to take some steps to map out a plan. Plans usually have, they have a varying number of columns. My plans tend to have 3 columns. So you want to think about some prevention strategies. You want to think about some teaching strategies, so some new skills you're going to teach. And then you want to think about how you're going to manage consequences, how you reward positive behaviors, and think about how you're going to cope when the challenging behaviors happen. So I'll go through each of these one at a time. So first we'll talk about how we're going to change the environment to match kids' current skills. So here you're wanting to think back about what you learned by observing the behavior and think about within the routine what makes the challenging behavior more likely. Can the triggers for the challenging behavior be reduced, or can supports for appropriate behavior be increased? So here's Jake's example. Challenging behaviors for Jake are more likely if Jake is rushed or if requests are unexpected. And Jake's parents they make a decision that at first he's only going to be expected to complete 4 tasks on his own each morning. So he's going to have to get dressed, eat breakfast, clear his dishes, brush his teeth. That's it. So everything else, Jake's parents will help him with the night before or do instead, so that in his morning there are fewer things he has to do. None of those things will be unexpected for him. And because there are fewer things, he won't be as rushed. Now, this is a family where Jake was getting up at a regular time every day already, but if he hadn't, another possible prevention strategy could be to have him set an alarm and make sure he's getting up with enough time to be able to get out the door without being rushed. So for Grace, her behaviors are more likely if, for Sarah, the behaviors are more likely if Grace is busy with something else, so if mom's busy with something else, and if Sarah hasn't slept well. So what Grace decides to do is that in that period in the evening, she's going to stay in the same room as Sarah whenever she can. And if she can't play with Sarah in any individual moment, she's going to get her started with a preferred toy. And she's going to think of these strategies as especially important if Sarah hasn't slept well. So really, Jake's parents and Sarah's mom are changing the environment to try to make it a better fit for the kids' current skills and try to reduce the chances that the challenging behaviors will happen. Sarah's going to be less likely to do behavior to get mom's attention if mom's already in the same room with her. So a really common question when we think about making these types of changes is it fair? So if you've got more than one kid, is it fair to the other kids? If you've got a classroom with lots of kids in the classroom, is it fair to the other kids in the classroom? And is it even fair to the kid themselves? Is it going to prepare them for the real world where these types of accommodations won't necessarily always be in place? So this is why I feel like that underlying assumption about challenging behaviors reflecting skill delays is really important. So I really think it's important for us to start thinking about some of these skill delays as being similar to other types of skill delays that we're more comfortable talking about. So if a kid has a reading disability, we feel more comfortable not expecting those kids to be reading at the same level as other kids in their class right away. The same way I feel if kids have other types of skill delays, it's appropriate to make the environment a match for their current skills and not expect too much for them right away. And it's helpful, I find, to have like a way to think about that in your head. So I like this one. Fair isn't everyone getting the same thing. It's everyone getting what they need to be successful. So there's a psychologist, Ross Green. He often talks about how fair doesn't mean equal. And I think that's a nice, short and sweet way to think about that idea. So we've thought about ways to change the environment to match current skills. We're also going to want to think about how to make sure that our expectations for our kids' behavior is as clear as possible to them. We want to make our expectations specific. So things like, please put your clothes in the hamper before you go to bed instead of make sure your room's clean at night. We want to make sure that the expectations are appropriate based on the age and skill level of the child. And we want to think about ways to make the expectations as understood by the child as possible. And 2 common strategies that can be helpful with this are visual supports and social stories. So you can see the visual, there's an example of a visual schedule on the far left. That can just be a way for things like Jake. I'll show you Jake's visual schedule in a minute. But to really make it really clear to kids exactly what steps or what behavior are going to be expected.
Switchboard, please. Dr. Allison Gray, call the switchboard.
There are apps available now for visual schedules for kids. I don't know if I'm just old school. I kind of like the ones where they're actually posted up on the wall and you can take them off and put them in a pocket, but there are apps available, I'm guessing for teenagers especially, that they may be a good fit. First then visuals can also be a really helpful way to make expectations clear. So the idea often with first then is for the then to be something that the child's really looking forward to, and the first to be something that might be harder for them to cooperate with or to try. So first play by yourself, then I'll play with you. Or first we'll go to soccer, then we'll get an ice cream. So for some of our kids who have a lot less language, first then visuals can be really helpful to make our expectations clear. And then social stories are also a really nice way, especially for more verbal kids, to make it really clear what behavior we're hoping to see in our kids, in what types of contexts, what types of rewards we're going to be getting for working on the new skills. Social stories are fantastic if you can make them and put pictures of the kids and their families and their friends in the story. They like to read them over and over again because the story is about themselves. Or for some kids, if you can figure out ways to get characters into the story, if they really have special interests or characters and they can be incorporated into the story, that can help. So for a kid who's really into Dora, a story about Dora and how Dora would like you to try these behaviors can be really helpful. And there's a lot of resources online for visual schedules and social stories. So you can just Google either of those things and the world will open up if you haven't already. So Jake's parents decided to make a visual schedule to show him the specific tasks he was going to complete each morning and the order to complete them. So Jake can read, so they just decided to use a whiteboard in the kitchen and write out the 4 tasks. And they encouraged Jake to write down the time that he completed the 4 tasks. And we'll come back to that idea later because it's also helping him to develop skills with time management and organization. So you can really just come up with whatever you think will be a good fit for the child that you're working with.
Is that how much time it took him to?
This one would be like the time that he did it.
Okay.
So it's like he got dressed at 7:35. He was dressed and then he was done his breakfast at 7:45 and he cleared the dishes at 7:46 and he brushed his teeth at 7:50. So it's a way for the parents to be able to monitor his behavior and for him to see how long those tasks are taking. Yeah. It will be stickers or a check or the one on the previous slide where you've got Velcro strips on the back of paper and kids can put the Velcro into a pocket at the end of the schedule. Those work really well as well. Okay, so now we've moved into our teaching column, and this is, I think, one of the most important parts of a really strong positive behavior support plan. So the idea here is we're going to try to think of a skill that we can teach our kids that they can do instead of the challenging behavior to get to the same goal. So here we've got Sarah breaking toys when mom is busy, and when she breaks toys, she gets social interaction from mom. So we have to think about something that Sarah can do instead that would be as easy as breaking toys and that would work just as well. So it's going to be just as reliable as breaking toys at getting mom to come on over and give her some attention. So can anybody think of an example of a possible replacement behavior for that scenario? What could she learn to do instead?
Ask.
Ask, yes. Great. So mom's going to teach her like magic words that if she says them, she's going to be ready to reinforce her right away every time. So mom decides to pick the words "let's play" and teach Sarah the power of those words across her daily routine, hoping that over time Sarah is going to choose to say "let's play" instead of choosing to break things to get her attention. And what she actually does, kind of going back to our last point of making expectations as clear as possible, she makes some "let's play" cards and puts them in some preferred places in the house. So if Sarah's not wanting to say "let's play," she can take the card and exchange it with mom to play as well. So either or both of those things can work, and for less verbal kids, the cards can work on their own even without kids talking. So then we've got Jake. He's refusing and yelling and swearing when his parents ask him to do things. And that's leading him to either avoid or delay tasks. This is a harder one to think of a replacement behavior for. I've got a bit of a hint in the fact that I put delay up there instead of avoid. Can anybody think of what Jake could learn to do instead? Yeah.
Ask to wait a bit.
Yes, great, that's fantastic. So what they decide to teach him to do is to say in 5 minutes, and that's going to be his magic statement, where parents are going to try as hard as they can to respect that. Whenever Jake says in 5 minutes, they'll be like, sure, in 5 minutes. And you really need to think of something that you think will be a fit based on that child. So they may need to teach him to set a timer for 5 minutes. They might, instead of say in 5 minutes, teach something like after the show, or another way to ask for a delay. So when you're picking a replacement behavior, it's helpful to be as specific as possible. So I actually suggest that parents and teachers think of the exact words that the child is going to use, or the exact act that they're going to do that's going to be the replacement behavior. Because then you can teach that very specific thing and make sure you provide lots of opportunities across the day, not just in the routine, to teach that thing. And it will stay effective because you've set it up as these magical words, so when they come out of the child's mouth in the moment, you're ready to honor them. So if it's a more general just suggestion that we're going to improve Sarah's language and get her to ask her mom for attention more often, that can be harder then for mom to know, okay, well, today she's doing this and today she's saying that, and when am I supposed to stop what I'm doing and give her the attention? But if you've got that specific magic word of let's play and the let's play card, it helps mom to remember, oh right, this is a really important part of the PBS plan when I get a card or when I get let's play. Even if I'm hungry and I want a snack or I need to respond to an email, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and honor the let's play, even if it's just briefly, to get the kid started with something new. And it's hard because it takes time, but over time, it saves you time, because dealing with the challenging behavior also takes time. And then, yeah, I think I had said it's great to provide opportunities to practice. So mom can be getting Sarah to exchange the let's play cards over the course of the day, even at times where it's not very likely at all that she'd be breaking toys, to really strengthen that skill of learning she can ask to play in an appropriate way. Okay, here are some other examples of common replacement behaviors based on the purpose or the function of the challenging behavior. If kids are engaging in challenging behaviors to avoid or escape tasks, they can be taught to ask for a delay, like Jake. They can be taught to ask to say no inappropriately. So some kids, when we start, if they can just say a calm no thank you, it's okay. They don't have to do it, and that's a good place to start. Or they can have a certain number of pass cards or times where they can get out of tasks in a given day appropriately. They can also be taught to ask for help. For some kids, if they have help with the task, they're much more willing to be able to do it. Kids who are engaging in challenging behaviors to get attention, they can be taught to ask for that social connection like we did with Sarah, or they can sometimes be asked to start an appropriate social activity. Some of our younger kids who are getting into challenging behaviors with peers in daycare centers, it can be helpful to teach them a specific game or a way to show their toys to their friends, to teach them like a magical way to get positive attention from peers instead of negative attention from peers. And kids who are engaging in challenging behaviors to get access to specific objects or activities can be taught more appropriate ways to ask for those objects or activities. And if there's a scenario where they're asking for a lot of objects or activities that aren't available right away, they can be taught to wait for the object or activity, or they can be taught how to plan to get access to that object or activity at a later time in the day. So if they've got a schedule for their day, they can learn how to put that activity on their schedule at a different time of day. So their request is still being honored. And for kids who do things for sensory reasons, they can be taught to do another activity that leads to the same sensory input. So if you think of our little one who was running to get the feeling of running, we can think about whether there are more appropriate activities they can do or request where they can run, or jump, or get other sensory input. And then we also want to think of other ways to target delayed skills. So here what we're thinking about is ways that we're going to gradually increase expectations within the routine. So for Jake, some of his delayed skills were with planning and organization and with coping with unexpected events. So over time, this isn't right away, Jake's parents are going to support him in learning how to make changes to his own schedule. They're also supporting him with time management, so that's why he's writing down the time that it's taking him to complete tasks. And when he gets really good with his morning routine the way it is, they're going to start to gradually introduce unexpected events. So once or twice a week, they'll put something on his schedule that he's not expecting, and think about a way to support him through that. And for Sarah's mom, Sarah's delayed skills were with communication and with independent play. So we're helping her with some communication skills because we're teaching her to say let's play, to play appropriately with mom. And then over time, Sarah decides that she's also going, or mom decides that she's also going to support Sarah in playing independently before being joined by mom. So when Sarah gives mom the let's play card, mom will say, great, yeah, I'll play. You go pick something and get started, and I'll join you in a minute. And kind of gradually increase the amount of time that Sarah's playing on her own before she's getting that reinforcer of playing with mom. All right, we're into the last column. So we're thinking now about consequence strategies. And one of the most important things in a positive behavior support plan is to think about how you're going to reward positive behaviors. So to pick the thing that you're going to reward, it can be very helpful to flip your thinking and to focus on what you're hoping to see the child do more often. So if you've got a child who's hitting, you might want to be focusing on catching times where they're using their words. With Jake, where he's talking back, parents might want to be catching times where he's cooperating with routines. And for Sarah, who's breaking toys, you might want to be catching times where Sarah's playing nicely. And you want to provide really specific praise. So that's where it's helpful to flip your thinking, think about the specific thing you're looking for, and then you're trying to build the kid's pride in learning that skill. You are getting so much better at playing nicely. It makes me so happy to see you playing nicely. Really can help kids. And social stories can be a part of that too, of helping kids to really develop pride in learning a new skill and understand the specific skill that you're hoping that they learn. And I just wanted to include also that we really don't need to worry about providing too much praise to kids who have autism spectrum disorders. Despite our best efforts, these kids may be corrected more often than other kids, and they may be put in more challenging contexts than other kids. So because of that, I think it's fantastic if they also get more praise than other kids. And if you talk to adults who had challenging behaviors when they were younger, they can often really remember the people who took the time to find the positive behaviors and praise them for them. It can mean so much for kids to be able to provide that praise. So there really is still a lot of thinking about, praise loses its meaning if we give it too often. My perspective is praise widely and specifically, and it's great. And to add to that, I find that for most kids, if you're focusing on improving a specific behavior or a routine, it's worth it to try to add something beyond the praise. Candy, access to special time or activities, small toys from the dollar store where you collect stickers and every 7th sticker you get a prize. Whatever you think will be motivating enough for the child and that you can tie to the praise to really make the child experience success as they move forward. And this is another fair doesn't mean equal scenario where you may be in a classroom or in a family where you're wondering, well, how can I reward one child and not another for different behaviors? But really, these behaviors are hard for these kids, and the rewards can help them to grow more quickly. So what Jake's parents decided to do is if he completed the 4 steps of his morning routine independently, he could play with Minecraft until he left for school. So this is part of him keeping track of his time. He gets to see, he knows when he's leaving for school, he knows when he wakes up, so he gets to monitor how long it takes him to do the things, the 4 steps between getting up and playing Minecraft. And the faster he does those behaviors, the more time he'll have with Minecraft before going to school. And Sarah's mom decides that if she notices Sarah playing nicely on her own, she'll give her 3 Smarties. So just a small reward, but that really brings the point home for Sarah and helps her to build this new skill of playing nicely. Last step of the PBS plan, we want to think about what we're going to do when the challenging behaviors happen. So with good prevention strategies in place, a good solid teaching plan, and a plan to provide rewards for positive behaviors, often the challenging behaviors will reduce, but you still need to be prepared for the challenging behaviors that will still happen every once in a while. And here what you want to be thinking about is how you're going to break the link between the challenging behavior and its original purpose. So Sarah's breaking toys to get interaction or attention from mom. So what mom's going to try to do is limit attention to the degree feasible. So I know if you're having your television knocked over, you're not going to not respond at all. But what mom's going to try to do is limit long explanations about why behavior is not appropriate and try not to play with Sarah in the period right after the challenging behavior happens. So if she sees that Sarah's about to knock over the TV, what she would do is go over and redirect her to a let's play card. So if you see a challenging behavior about to happen, you can go to the replacement behavior right away. That can be a key time to teach the replacement behavior. But if the behavior's already happened, the main thing you can do is just try to break that connection between the behavior and the reward so that it stops serving a good purpose. So Sarah's really learning, if I ask, let's play it, I get mom's attention, we get to play. If I knock over the television, I don't get that. And we've got Jake, who's refusing and yelling and swearing to avoid or delay doing tasks. And so this is another one where it can be challenging to think about, but what Jake's parents are going to try to do is to not allow that to the degree that they can. So they're going to try to make sure that there isn't a lot of nagging or reminders or discussion about completing tasks. And they're going to really monitor Jake to make sure that he does complete the tasks before he gets access to Minecraft. So then they've got a response they can provide if Jake's not cooperating. Oh, all these things need to be done if you're going to have Minecraft. And other than that, they won't provide any other things that would delay the time that it takes him to complete the tasks. So when we're thinking about consequences, it can be helpful to think about natural consequences whenever possible. So if a child's hitting or kicking during play that they enjoy, it might make sense to end the play to keep everybody safe. If a child's taking too long to follow a request, it might make sense to limit time for a preferred task that comes afterwards. But it's helpful to think that any type of consequence isn't going to be effective in changing behavior on its own because it doesn't teach new skills. Parents and teachers will often ask me, what about other types of negative consequences like timeout or taking away privileges? And those types of strategies can fit within PBS plans. It's just important to think about whether they seem like they'll be helpful for that child. So when you've used those strategies in the past, were they helpful for that child? And do they make sense based on the purpose of the behavior? So if a child's doing something to get out of a task, then timeout isn't a good fit for their behavior because that's a great way to get out of the task. But if they're doing it for attention, then it's possible that it could fit within the plan. So we've talked about a lot of different things. This is Jake's plan all pulled together. So Jake's parents are going to just have a limited number of tasks for Jake to complete in the morning. They're going to use a visual schedule to make that expectation really clear. They're going to teach him that he can say in 5 minutes to delay having to do tasks. And over time, they're going to add in some unexpected events and build Jake's skills making schedules. So he's going to get Minecraft for cooperating with routines. And parents have got a set response that they're ready for to use if needed. All tasks have to be complete before Minecraft, and they're going to try to avoid other reactions to his behavior. And here's Sarah's plan. Grace is going to stay in the same room as Sarah, especially if Sarah hasn't slept well. If she's busy, she's going to get Sarah started with a specific activity before doing the task she needs to do. She's going to focus on teaching Sarah how to ask to play using the Let's Play cards or just the words Let's Play. And after the plan's been in place for a while, she's going to gradually increase the amount of time that Sarah plays on her own before mom joins her. She's going to have Smarties ready for when she catches Sarah playing nicely, and she's going to try to limit her attention as much as she can when Sarah breaks toys. So while I've been talking through Jake and Sarah's plans, you guys may have been thinking of a lot of other possible strategies. There are a range of other different prevention strategies that could work well, like warnings could be a great strategy for Jake. There could be other teaching strategies that make sense, and there could be other consequence strategies that make sense too. As long as you're thinking about the purpose of the challenging behavior and the delayed skills that you'd like to build, lots of different plans and strategies, lots of different strategies can fit within the plan. And that's what's exciting about PBS. You can really pull together a plan that fits based on the strategies that the teachers and parents feel will fit well for that child. After you've got a plan, you want to do what I call giving it a good solid try. So you're changing your own behavior and you're changing what's expected of your child. And in behavioral psychology, we often see something called a extinction burst. So behavior is getting a little bit worse before they get better. Often people think also of kids kind of testing us when we change our expectations around kids. So we don't want to kind of change our strategies at the first sign that something's not working exactly the way we'd hoped. We want to give it a good solid try. But then after we've given it a good solid try, we also want to be open to the fact that there could be changes to the plan that would make it even better. So you want to think about whether the strategies are useful for you as a parent or a teacher, whether they're actually leading to reductions in challenging behavior, whether they feel feasible to implement, and then be prepared to make adaptations if needed. Some of the best PBS plans are developed after adapting an original plan. So it could be, for example, that Sarah's mom realizes that the Let's Play cards aren't helping, that Sarah's not going to them, she's dropping them or losing them, and that she's actually doing pretty well with her words just saying Let's Play. So we can adapt the plan and not have the cards as part of the plan. The flip side could be that the cards were the most helpful thing and that Sarah really had a hard time asking to play, but she could exchange those cards like no problem. So you try it out, you give it a good try, and then it's helpful to be open to making changes over time. So the road to behavior change has ups and downs for ourselves and for the kids that we're working with. So it's good to be patient with ourselves and to try just to remember the spirit of PBS. So we want to focus on the skills that we want our kids to learn and realize that if we meet kids in the right place, we really can help to move them forward. There's a great book, if you haven't already heard of it. It's called Parenting with Positive Behavior Support. It's not specific to kids with ASD. I think it's got a couple cases with teenagers with some challenging behavior and a younger child. That's really, really, really readable and talks about quite similar strategies to what I've talked about tonight. And if you're looking for support from the IWK around a challenging behavior with a little one, it makes sense to contact Central Referral, and supports may be available through the IWK Autism team or the Developmental Clinic.